Welcome to Navigating Consumer and Family Law Challenges. Insights from SoCal's trusted attorneys.
Hello and welcome to Navigating Consumer and Family Law Challenges with Amanda Hill. Amanda is a Southern California attorney who guides clients through marriage, divorce, and everything in between. My name is Kevin Rosenquist. Today we're going to talk about prenups and why you shouldn't just assume they're only for the ultra wealthy. From celebrity weddings in Venice to second marriages later in life, prenups are making headlines again. But how do they actually work and who really needs one? Amanda is here to give us the details. Amanda, welcome back.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So let's just start at the basics, just in case anybody's unfamiliar with it. What exactly is a prenuptial agreement, and who should consider getting one?
So, a prenuptial agreement is an agreement where two people who are engaged to be married reach a written contract that they execute before marriage, before they walk down the aisle, sign the marriage certificate, get it legally binding, to determine if they were to get divorced, what would that look like as far as their finances, their assets, their debts, their liabilities. There's limitations on what can be included in the document, which we can get into later, but that's the gist of it. Is it's really a contract that two people enter into before they get married.
Should everyone have a prenup, or is it not necessary?
I'm of the mindset and the school of thought that it will never hurt you to have one. And I get that there is this kind of bad reputation that prenuptial agreements get that, oh, do you
Definitely a
really love
stigma.
them?
Yep.
There's a stigma. Do you really love them? Why do you need it? You're
Why
already
don't you
thinking
trust me?
about the relationship ending, so on and so forth. I mean, I've heard everything. But the way I describe it to people is it's really just an insurance policy, just like you have car insurance and health insurance. You never want those things to happen. You never want to get in your car one day, drive down the highway, and get in an accident. But unfortunately, every day those things do happen to some people.
Right.
And you want to make sure, number one, that you got good car insurance and to cover any property damages. But number two, that you've got good health insurance that can take care of you if you get physically injured. Right. So a prenuptial agreement is just if, God forbid, something were to happen and you guys have to go your merry way for whatever those reasons are, you know exactly how things are going to be laid out, at least as to the financial aspect of it.
There's definitely, I think, when you hear most of the time when you hear about prenups, it's very rich people, celebrities, which is kind of what I led the show off with. Is that true? Is it really only necessary? I mean, I know you said that everyone could have one or should have one, but why do you think? I guess let me phrase it like this: why do you think that the general consensus with a lot of people is that it's for rich people or celebrities?
I think it's because some people think, well, I don't have much, so
Yeah,
what do I need to protect anyways?
kind of like
Well,
a estate plan, I suppose, right?
yeah, but
Yeah.
even that, I mean, that's a whole nother conversation. But what people don't understand is a prenuptial agreement also talks about what will happen in the future. So you can put in a prenuptial agreement that anything that I gain or obtain or earn, for example, a retirement account in the future, that's going to remain my separate property. So, for example, two people just getting straight out of college, all they have is student loan debt. They may think, I absolutely don't need a prenup. I don't have anything to my name but debt. Okay, well, you want to make sure that all your debt is only going to be yours, number one. But what if you decide to start your own business after you get
Mhm.
married? What if that business goes sour? Do you want your spouse to be on the hook for that, or do you want it to be your own separate venture? Right? What if you come into a bunch of money? What if you hit the lottery? What if you are very successful? You go back to school and you start making $500,000 a year, and the other person makes only 100. I mean, in a prenup, you can include not only what exists now, but what may exist in the future, and that's what a lot of people don't understand.
That's a good myth to bust for sure. What else you talked about a couple of the things. What types of things are generally included in a prenup, and what can't be included that might surprise people?
Okay. Yeah, sure. So every state is different. In California, we have very specific rules. So, for example, you cannot include future custody agreements or what a parenting plan is going to be.
Uh,
The courts do not allow that. Child support terms cannot be included as well. That's going to be based off what's best for the children at the time of the separation. So those cannot be included. A lot of people, and it's very spicy, a lot of people try to talk about it, is infidelity clauses, right? And, oh, can we put an infidelity clause that if they cheat, they're not going to get a dime from the estate? Well, can you include it? Sure. Is it enforceable though legally? Jury's still kind of out on that
Hmm.
because a lot of times it can get thrown out if it's fought over in court. Because what does infidelity even really mean? As some
Right.
people think, is that kissing? Is that sleeping with somebody? Is that texting with somebody? What does that even mean, right? And is that really enforceable? And or were this was the person set up? And what proof do you have, right?
Right.
So a lot of that is just really spicy headlines that in practicality purposes doesn't often come into play. um, you know so there's some things that I think a lot of times get people think can be included but that can't. But in general, you can talk about spousal support, or what some people still call alimony. You can include that, whether somebody's going to get in the state of California, are they going to get a certain amount? Are they not going to get any? Are both parties waiving their right? Are they only going to get it for a certain period of time? I had a case one time where they got a certain flat dollar amount for every year that they were married. And so it would depend on, at the time of separation, how many years at that point the other spouse got, because some math would be done. So if it was 5 years, 10 years, $100,000 for each year married, that's what they would get. And they wouldn't get a monthly amount.
Hmm.
So, it all is dependent on each individual circumstances. But you can include that. A lot of times, the biggest issue is real property or investment accounts. A lot of people want to protect their retirement accounts and say, hey, I want my retirement to be mine. I'm the one that put in the years, the time, the effort with my employer for 30 plus years. I want to keep it if I were to get divorced. So that's a big one that a lot of people want to protect. Also, too, though, debts too. Sometimes people enter into a marriage or plan to enter into a marriage, and they know their fiance has a lot more debt than them, and so they don't want to be on the hook for that either, right? So those are like the main categories of assets or debts that can be included in the agreement.
I feel like it probably comes into play even more so with second marriages, blended families, things like that. And I suppose also, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong on this, but the conversation's probably a little easier when a second marriage happens, right? Because people are like, well, I've been through this before. Let's just get a prenup together just to protect everything just in case. Whereas if you try to bring it up in that first time, there's that stigma we talked about earlier. But is it more, I don't want to say important, but is it more impactful or is it more necessary in second marriages or with blended families?
I wouldn't say it's more necessary. I think it's going to muddy the water more, right? It definitely is more prevalent. I would say more common,
Yeah.
where somebody has been married once or twice already, and they have learned their lesson the hard way the first time when they didn't have a prenuptial agreement and don't want to go through that again. And so they're coming and saying, okay, I want to make sure that I'm protected going into this new relationship.
Does California's community property system make prenups more valuable?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Because there are so many people, which I totally understand, they don't practice law, but they think that if, for example, a credit card is not in their name, they're not responsible for it. Or if a bank account is not in their name, that's not their money. It's that's not their spouse's money, it's theirs. That's absolutely false. Under community property law, it doesn't matter who's on title of that account or that credit card account. If it was opened up during the marriage and it was money put into it, or money, the card was swiped and used to buy groceries or used to buy a vacation, that is a community debt and a community obligation. It doesn't matter whose name it is.
Really? Okay. That's interesting. So even if you have separate accounts, you still all community property.
Correct.
Okay. All right. That is something I'll bet a lot of people get wrong because
A
that
lot of people,
yeah.
yes.
Yeah, because I know people who keep all their finances separate. My wife and I combined everything. I don't think there's a right or wrong. It just depends on how you want to do things. But
Sure.
I would imagine that a lot of people think, well, if we keep it separate, then if we ever do get divorced, then there's no, you know,
Right.
yeah.
Right, which is just not it's not accurate. And
Mhm.
and there's reasons behind it, right? And obviously there's two different schools of thought whether that's right or wrong, but that's just California law. Um but the idea is that, sometimes there's some marriage dynamics where one person or one spouse is more in charge of the finances than the other, or for whatever reason they have better credit, whatever the reasons may be, one person is kind of on most of the assets, or maybe controls them or controls the spending. Doesn't mean that the other person doesn't have, unless there's a prenup, again, unless there's a prenup, just as equal access to those assets, or to be able to use those credit cards.
I've heard of situations where prenups were signed too close to the wedding date and they get I think nullified completely. Is that true?
They can be. There's no for sure. So the only rule in California is that there are several rules, but the main one regarding timing is you have to be able to get the final version. And so to speak, the best way to describe it on layman's terms is sit on it for 7 days. Think about it, ponder on it, make sure you really agree to it. So, whatever that final version is, you cannot then sign it that same day. You have to wait 7 days and then sign it. And then, of course, it has to be executed before you actually get married. So, the idea is, and the best practice is to get it done, wrapped up, signed way before you walk down the aisle. But as long as technically you've received it, it's been at least 7 days, there's been no changes, everybody agrees to it, and then you sign it, and then the very next day you get married, it's still enforceable.
Hmm.
That's why you really want to make sure that each side has an attorney too. Because if one side doesn't have an attorney and one does, and let's say the one that doesn't have an attorney is the one waiving a bunch of potential interest in assets or real property, then yeah, it's going to be a little bit easier to strike down that prenup if they were to get a divorce.
Yeah, and is it like sometimes you can make the argument, or maybe a lawyer would make the argument that someone felt coerced or felt like they didn't have a choice but to sign it if they were going to go through with the marriage because it was so close. Is that something you see happen?
Yes, and that's the main argument
Yeah.
that I think is the most persuasive. In fact, early on in my career, I successfully got a prenup thrown out, and it was millions of dollars worth of assets at issue. And one of the issues was my client was not represented at the time that he signed it. He felt coerced. He was marrying a significant other who was coming, came from a lot of money, had a lot of assets. Certainly was hoping to protect them, and when you went through what the parameters are under the state of California laws as to what the prenup needs to look like and the timing of everything, it was clear that there was coercion there. And so we ended up agreeing to set it aside instead of litigating over the issue. Once we kind of put it to them like, hey, if we go to trial on this, you're going to lose. And so we ended up still settling the case, but the prenup essentially got thrown out.
Wow. Yeah, that's interesting. I've heard those stories before. I find that very fascinating. There's also postnuptial agreements, right?
Yes, there are postnuptial agreements in California. Not every state allows postnuptial agreements. They are held to a stricter scrutiny. That's a complicated way of saying they're easier to attack in court. The reason that is because you're already married. So if now you're already married and potentially the timing of that also comes into play, right? So if you're
Yeah.
already married and you've already commingled things and purchased things or received gifts and things have already been happening, and then maybe things are on the rocks and now you want to consider doing a postnuptial agreement. Well, number one, the reason why you're doing a postnuptial agreement can come into play. And number two, now you really got to dig deep into all the finances, all the assets, what's happened since marriage. So they are not as strong, but you can do postnuptial agreements. You definitely can. Not saying that they're not enforceable, but they're held to a higher standard for sure.
Is there a time limit on there? Like after a certain number of years, you can't do one anymore?
No, not
No.
necessarily.
Okay. Because like, see your point. Like, if you do it 2 days after the wedding, is a lot different than 2 years
Right.
or 10 years.
Right, right. Sometimes people will do them because let's say maybe, you know what, we're gonna give this marriage a second shot. We're gonna go to marital counseling. But I don't want the financial part of this to be lingering over my head. I want to continue to be in this marriage because I actually want to be in the marriage. And so we'll do a postnuptial agreement. Now you can't do a postnuptial agreement in lieu of doing an actual separation. Like you have to have the intent to be in the marriage still and
Uh,
not just this is like basically getting a way to get around not having a prenup, but eventually you're getting divorced for sure. So you just have to really be mindful of that because you don't want the other side arguing that if you were to go when you do go to court to get the divorce or legal separation that well this was all a farce because you really just did this because you knew it was inevitable that we were going to get a divorce.
do celebrities like to, we kind of started talking about that a little bit. Do they often get things wrong about the way prenups work as well? Do they, because they a lot of times have significant assets. Do they think they're just completely covered and get kind of blindsided by that as well?
I will say this: they are paying the big bucks. They're hiring the attorneys that cost $1,500, $2,000 an hour, and they probably have them on retainer. And I would say probably less likely, right?
Hmm.
That they're probably going to get the things the right way. But again, because there's limitations on what can be included, if the celebrities decide after marriage to have children, those things are still going to be caught up in the courts, are going to have to be dealt with after, regardless of a prenup. So,
Hmm.
um, Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie, that's a really good example of
Yeah.
that, right? They had many children together, and there was allegations about, you know, substance abuse issues. They ended up working it out, but there was a lot of headlines regarding that, a lot of allegations being said and being made. And so, regardless of a prenup, if there's kids involved, there may still be some issues there.
I want to wrap up with this. If anyone's listening and is like, God, I really should get a prenup, but I'm really scared to bring this up. This is not, I know how this is gonna go. Like, is there any like tips or advice you can give to someone who might want to do it but is a little worried?
Yeah, I would say to give the analogy of the insurance policy,
Mhm.
right? And hope that they understand insurance and they're not someone walking around with no health insurance or like or car insurance, which is, would be pretty rare, but that's the hope, right? And hopefully that makes sense to them. But also that there is this idea that if we deal with this now and you can get through that process and you can have those hard conversations, then in reality, it's probably much better for your relationship going forward because you're
Yep.
able to have those hard conversations about, hey, what if this doesn't work out? What will it look like? I don't want to leave. For example, I have people that come to me and say, hey, I don't want to leave her high and dry. Like we have intent on having children, and I know she's entering into this marriage and I don't want her to work, and so I want to be able to provide this certain lifestyle for her. So I want to make sure that she's going to be protected. So the other thing that's nice too is you don't have to include everything. Like for example, you can do a prenup that just protects one or one asset, right? For example, one time I did one where it was just protecting a house. The person said, I just paid off that mortgage, I don't want to have anything to do, I just want to make sure that that will always remain my house. Great, we just did a prenup related to that house, protecting that house,
Okay, that's
right?
interesting. Yeah.
Or you say, you know what, I don't care, our assets can be commingled, but I just want to make sure because we both have the same education level, we make about the same money, I don't want to have to deal with supporting the other person. And we don't have any there, maybe that's a second marriage or they're older, we're not going to have any children, no spousal support. Okay, the prenup's just going to specify that normal community property laws will apply, but there'll be no spousal support. So it really is, you can
Yeah.
make the document your own. It doesn't have to be that you get nothing, right?
Right. Yeah. It's not, I think that's probably like the sort of the misconception too, is it's like, it's generally thought of as a way for someone to cut someone out, like to cut somebody out of getting anything, and you want to keep your money and not have to give it to your ex-spouse. And it's not really what it's for.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. And I will say the trend right now that I'm seeing is a lot of educated people who are getting married later in life. They both maybe have worked really hard in their careers and now they're established and now they're getting married. There's more there's quicker understanding of the benefits of the prenup because they both, maybe they're on relatively equal playing fields as far as where they're at in life, and so they both equally want those protections in place and don't want anything to be muddied.
Hmm. Yeah. Excellent point. Well, interesting stuff for sure. All right. Well, thanks for listening to Navigating Consumer and Family Law Challenges. If you're thinking about marriage and wondering about prenup and whether it's right for you, visit kndhlawgroup.com to connect with Amanda. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Leave us a review, especially if you know someone planning a high profile wedding of their own, or maybe need some advice on this. Definitely send us their way. Thank you so much, Amanda. Always great talking to you. Thanks for your time.
All right, thank you.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.